Please take your seats. The meeting is about to begin. Remember to speak into the microphone, as this meeting is being recorded for public record. Please stand by. We are going on air in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to the January 16th, 2025 meeting of the Land Use and Sustainability Committee. Mr. Attorney, let's do a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Dominguez.
Aye.
Commissioner Suarez will be arriving shortly. Vice Chair Bott.
Present.
And Chairman Fernandez.
Present.
We have a quorum.
As the attorney mentioned, Commissioner Suarez will be arriving shortly. Today's meeting of the Land Use and Sustainability Committee will be conducted in a hybrid format with members of the committee physically present in the commission chambers at Miami Beach City Hall, and staff and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. To participate virtually, members of the public may dial 888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID, which is 8505-9923-037#, or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 8505-9923-037. Anyone wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon in the Zoom app or dial *9 if participating by phone. With that, Mr. Director, are there any changes, edits, withdrawals, referrals on today's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have two announcements. Item number 5, which is an amendment to the Comprehensive Plan and Resiliency Code regarding nonconforming provisions and RM1 regulations, specific to on-site parking and residential uses in non-conforming hotels on the north side of Belle Isle. This item is being deferred to the February meeting. And item number 9, the monthly update on Geo Bond Beach Walk reforestation project. This is being deferred to a future date.
Perfect. And I will also announce that at the February 20th meeting, we will also be doing our discussion on the LTC, bi-weekly LTC having to do with the North Beach Code compliance and property maintenance update. And that will be happening at the February 20th meeting of the Land Use Committee. And I've also asked the city administration to consider whether it would be feasible to have the meeting in North Beach, to take the committee meeting up to North Beach. So we're checking to see if that would be feasible. With that, is there a motion to set the agenda?
I so move.
It's been moved by the vice chair, seconded by the chair, so by acclamation, we can show the agenda adopted. I'm gonna take item number 2 out of order, take that first, then we'll follow the agenda as printed. So with that, Commissioner Vice Mayor Bott, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I wanted to have the staff and the developer themselves come and give us an update on what's going on with the Ocean Terrace project. It is a really important project for the health and well-being of North Beach. It's been vacant for too long. The park looks like it's bursting, ready to open, and that's great. But I'm also really curious to hear what's happening with the hotel and the condos themselves. So.
And before we recognize staff, I'm sorry, let's just have the director read the title into the record.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
This is item number 2, discuss the status of the private portion of the Ocean Terrace redevelopment project.
All right, and David Gomez, welcome, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Gomez, Director of Capital Improvements. This is a fairly positive update. The public portion of the project commenced in October of 2023. It has been moving essentially on schedule and is scheduled to be completed or attain substantial completion this spring. So we'll be able to put that park and that asset online later this spring. The developer has reported to us that the design remains consistent for the private portion with HPB approvals. They are looking at some minor revisions that they're discussing with planning staff now, but it is generally in alignment with the original HPB approval. And they anticipate launching sales of residents in the first quarter of this year. There should be a representative from the developer online to give you a further update.
All right, PJ, Guillermo, there's a representative online via Zoom. Let's recognize him to present to the committee. Do we know Commissioner Bond?
It should be Jared Green who's making himself available.
Jared, good afternoon, welcome. We cannot hear you.
You cannot hear me?
Jared, we cannot hear you. Okay, in the future, anyone from the public that is coming to make a special presentation, if they're not on public hearing, I would like them to be in person. We have other members coming to speak on a night. So Jared, if you could just unmute yourself.
Okay, so while we're waiting, hopefully for Jared to sort his technical issues out, would it be possible to, I don't know what the right mechanism is, but to have this come back quarterly so that we can get real-time updates on what's going on?
I will be happy to request the developer do that.
And I would, and to add on to that, happy to hear about the residential sales that they're gonna start the first quarter, and the park completion, I believe, this spring. My concern continues to be the structures, the historic structures on Ocean Terrace. I want to make sure that they remain in proper structural integrity. That is my concern there as we move forward. And Commissioner Bond, this is your item. I'd encourage you as a sponsor to perhaps be requesting a structural analysis on the existing structures to make sure they're not in peril. And maybe, through the guidance of our staff, maybe when this comes back in a quarter, they could come back.
Yep.
And since we weren't able to hear from Jared today, maybe since we'll be up in North Beach on February, hopefully we'll be in North Beach for our next committee meeting. Maybe they could attend in person and present to the committee in person.
Yep, I will follow up on all of that.
All right, and staff, if, Tom, I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add on that?
No, I'll reach out to my staff to have them take a look at the conditions of the buildings on site to make sure that there's nothing out of the ordinary there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, through the chair, if I may.
Of course.
I think there may have been one over the number of years since when this first got approved by the commission at the time. I think one of the buildings where facades has been lost. I don't want to lose any additional facades. And I know last year I met with Sandor and we talked about upgrading the way it looked because it was looking really kind of ratty. And there's talk about painting, and I think some stuff has been painted, but I'd like, that's what I was hoping to have the conversation with Jared about, was to really get a full update on what's going on, what needs to happen sooner rather than later. Like progress, that it's continuing at pace is good. Let's remember though that this has been a project for, almost a decade now. And so we need to really make sure that we keep our eye on the ball and move this forward, that we don't have any more delays and we don't have any unintended consequences and losses up there.
Yep.
But we're very excited about the park, and we're very excited to hear that things are moving, and let's keep that going.
We can celebrate spring at Ocean Terrace Park.
There you go.
There we go. Commissioner Dominguez or any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Commissioner Dominguez? No?
Comments at this time.
All right. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none in person, any via Zoom? Seeing none via Zoom. Thank you, Mr. Gomez, for your presentation. And I'm going to just take a moment of personal privilege before we move on to our next item. I just want to take a moment to congratulate my mom and dad that today they're celebrating their 49th wedding anniversary. So to my mother-in-law who is celebrating today a big birthday. I will be
29.
I will be forced into exile if I say which number birthday it is. But to my parents, happy anniversary, and to my mother-in-law, Kathy Wolforth, very happy birthday. And Mr. Director, yes.
For the Ocean Terrace item, you want this moved to the next meeting, February, right?
February, and
Okay.
hopefully it'll be very appropriately located in North Beach.
Perhaps in the Broadmoor.
You know where?
The Broadmoor.
Yeah, work with David, yes. Yeah. All right. With that, let's call up item number 1, Mr. Director.
Okay, item number 1 is discuss amending the land development regulations of the city code for the RO Residential Office District along Alton Road between 12th and 14th Street, as well as applicable sections of the nonconformance use regulations to permit alcoholic beverage establishments on a limited basis as an accessory use.
Commissioner Dominguez, this is your item. You're welcome to present your item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item was brought forward by a resident that also owns the nursery that is on Alton Road. I took a former planning board member with me to look at the site and get their thoughts, and they actually wrote the legislation, which then the legal team here at City Hall made into what we're reading today. And maybe Tom can expand on this a little bit more. The block before and the block after can sell alcohol, and it's just this little space because of how it's zoned, it can't. And there aren't any residences near it, and on either side, it's businesses. And it's meant to be a locals hangout. There's no parking other than metered, and I think it's a good item. Tom, anything you'd want to share?
I'll just clarify that the area, the 1,200 and 1,300 blocks on the east side of Alton Road are zoned RO. They were rezoned RO in the late 90s as part of a citywide downzoning. They used to be CD2. And a lot of those uses, including this gardening center, became legal nonconforming when they were downzoned. You're correct, north of 14th Street is CD2, you can sell alcohol. South of 12th Street, once you get past Flamingo Park, is CD2, and alcohol sales are permitted there. So this
thank
proposal
you.
here would allow for the limited sale of alcoholic beverages within existing nonconforming cafes.
And it's not hard liquor. They want to sell beer and wine. It's a charming cafe, if you will, that sells salads and sandwiches, and they'd be open till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And I think everyone should go take a look at it. It's a beautiful location.
And I would agree with you. This is certainly a very unique and special location, long-standing establishment in our city with a very positive history of performance in our city. So I welcome this very much. Commissioner Bott, you're recognized.
Yeah, I think this is great. The resident came to me as well, and I know the area, and I've looked at plants there, and, you know, staying open till 10 o'clock inside and 8 o'clock outside seems to be very compatible with positive neighborhood use.
Question, what is the current occupancy of this establishment?
This occupancy, this establishment currently has 10 seats. That's what's on their
10
BTR.
seats.
They're allowed to have 10 seats.
And which I think it's something so reasonable, and I think it would align with the spirit of this legislation, that this serves a very, it's a very modest use. This isn't a large establishment, and the legislation is not intended for anything large. It'd be great to reference it, the sponsor agrees, in the item itself, that, this is for a small establishment like that with limited seating of no more than 10 or no more than a dozen, because that way it keeps with what the spirit of this is. It's a garden center that happens to have a little cafe, and we're not talking about a bar or a wine club or anything like that. This is just a small neighborhood place. So if the sponsor agrees, I would like to just put that 10 occupancy limit as part of the legislation.
And what did you say the occupancy was?
Currently, their BTR allows for 10 seats. It's a very small cafe.
Yeah, I've been. It seemed like maybe more than 10 would fit there.
Yeah, they may have room for 10, but technically, they're only allowed to have 10. And if they were going to propose more than 10, that would be an expansion of a non-conforming use. So,
All right, well, let's start with 10.
okay.
Yeah, and also, let's just make sure, how does the vesting work in this situation? Because whenever we talk about alcohol, in the past, we've had conversations about vesting. Mr. Attorney, could you guide us on that?
Because this is an amendment to the LDRs to allow alcohol to be served, even on a limited basis, when somebody comes in and obtains approval, BTRCU, for an alcoholic beverage establishment, they would be vested in that approval. What we could do here, if the commission wanted to preserve its ability to change hours again in the future, is to clarify that the hours of sale are subject to future change.
And I think that that's reasonable. Again, it goes in line with with prior legislation we have passed and authorities that we as a legislative body would have liked to have kept in the past. And so I think it just makes, at this point, legislative sense to ensure that we retain that authority.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none in person on Zoom, seeing none via Zoom. Any other comments from the dais? Seeing none, can we show this item adopted by acclamation? Yep. All right, good job, Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you, guys.
And I'd like the record to reflect that Commissioner Suarez has made it to our meeting. Thank you, Commissioner Suarez, for joining us. Let's call up item number 3.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 3 is discuss amending the land development regulations to authorize the city commission to approve a fee waiver by resolution for land use board application fees for variances where the variance is required to make repairs or improvements to correct a deficiency identified in a building recertification inspection report for a residential apartment building, condominium, or cooperative.
All right, this is an item I placed on the agenda to discuss the feasibility of waiving land use board application fees for variances needed to make repairs or improvements based on issues identified in recertification reports for residential buildings. And as we all know, all buildings have to go through these recertifications. And the notations made in those recertification reports usually relate to safety requirements needed to bring their buildings back up to the standards of today's code and to the standards that are needed for public safety. What occurs is that individuals, they're forced to do these repairs, and at times they've had to then go before a land use board to get approvals to do repairs that they are required to do in order to obtain their recertification certificate. And this can become often a costly endeavor for associations, especially for cash-strapped associations. And so with the assistance of our city attorney and our planning director, we've crafted legislation to help address that. And I'd like to recognize our city attorney to walk us through the legislation that we've crafted today to help those associations facing this scenario.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the ordinance has been drafted to allow the city commission to waive by resolution some or all of the fees associated with variance applications when the variance is required to comply with an applicable building recertification. So it would allow the commission to do that on a case-by-case basis where a property owner is required to make changes to the property, but to do so, they would need a variance from one of the land use boards.
Great. And Mr. Director, I don't know if you have any comments to add regarding this legislation.
No, Mr. Chair, the only thing I would add is that if there is support for this, it would be sent to the city commission for referral to the planning board as an LDR amendment.
Okay. And I'd like to recognize Gabriel Caravano that is joining us today and the members of his association. They're an example of a condominium association that was going through a 40-year recertification. They fell victims to what we can call predatory activity of bad contractors that, in essence, stole their money. They had to then hire new contractors. They had to file applications to go before the land use boards that was going to put their members in a very difficult financial situation, have to pass, further assessments in order to pay for this. And they came to me pretty much in tears. The community came to me in tears with what they were going to be suffering. And Gabriel, I want to recognize you to explain to us what it was that you experienced and why this legislation is important for associations like yours.
So I'm going to translate for Gabriel. My name is Mike. I'm the property manager for Boston Plaza, and I'm here to represent them as well.
Hola, mi nombre es Gabriel Carabaño. Disculpen, no hablo inglés y por eso me está acompañando Mike. Planteo el caso.
Sí.
Sí. Fíjense, nosotros venimos de un edificio que estaba cumpliendo para la certificación de los 40 y 50 años. Teníamos un board, me voy a explicar un poquito, voy a tratar de ceder el tiempo. Tuvimos que salir de un board que no estaba haciendo bien las gestiones. Eso nos llevó a
Vamos a
actuar.
hacerlo por pedazos. Si
Ok.
nos dice pedacito por pedacito, así el administrador de la propiedad le puede ir traduciendo y los otros miembros del comité pueden entender lo que usted está diciendo.
Okay.
So, Boston's, they're the new board, they've been struggling, you know, for the past years with either, he said vendors taking advantage of them, mismanagement of their money as well, their funds. And one of the biggest issues they had was, the 50-year certification.
Eso nos llevó a actuar ante el DVPR para poder hacer el cambio del board. Tenemos 4 rectab donde ya si al quinto rectab íbamos a tener un tema de desalojo del edificio, y eso nos llevó a actuar rápidamente una vez tomar acciones para la certificación de los 40 y 50 años.
The misuse was one of, and the advantage they were taking care of was what led them to reach out to the DPR and, you know, start the whole process of removing the board that was back then. And at that point, they had 4 red tags. The building was going to be closed due to the recertification. That's why they had to act speedily, so to get it done.
En el proceso de la certificación necesitamos hacer una iluminación del parqueo exterior al edificio, que pertenece al edificio, y tuvimos que instalar 3 postes que, de acuerdo a un estudio fotométrico que hizo el ingeniero eléctrico que contratamos, determinó dónde era la mejor ubicación de esos postes, ¿no? Dónde mejor podían estar ubicados los postes de acuerdo al estudio fotométrico.
So part of the certification is required for them to pass a photometric test. This photometric test included them, they had to install 3 light posts in order to pass this test. If we couldn't install these posts, we would not be able to pass the certification, which means another red tag and possible eviction of all the unit owners.
Eso nos llevó a hacer la instalación de los postes para poder obtener la certificación de los 40 y 50 años, y esa instalación de los postes tuvimos que hacerla sin permiso, pero no, digamos, por tema de la celeridad que teníamos, tuvimos que hacerlo de esa forma, porque se me olvidó comentar antes, el ingeniero eléctrico que estaba antes con el antiguo board que sacamos, envió una carta a la ciudad diciendo que ya la carta como de ocupación eléctrica que le había enviado ya queda sin efecto al momento que nosotros lo despedimos del servicio que estaba dando, porque no había respuesta de él hacia la ciudad de las comunicaciones.
Para llegar al grano del asunto, ustedes tuvieron que hacer la instalación dentro de un setback para poder cumplir con los requerimientos de la recertificación, del estudio de recertificación.
Así es. Nosotros tuvimos que hacer... disculpe.
So at that point, since we changed vendors, due to the fact that they were not taking the inefficient, the current engineer that we had before he was terminated, he had sent a safe to occupy letter to the city.
I'm sorry, you sent a what?
A safe to occupy letter to the city.
Okay.
That was going to grant us a couple more months to be able to actually go through the process of variance, you know, and take care of things. At that point, the moment he was terminated, he took back his safe to occupy letter and left us with no means of protection.
Yes.
Can I just, for clarification, Nick, I'm not sure if this is a Tom or a Nick question, but are vendors allowed to rescind letters that they swear under oath are legitimate documentation certifying that something is safe? I mean, that's punitive and retaliatory, and it either is or it isn't safe.
I think the best way I can answer that is to say that the property owners, the management company, the association may have a claim against the individual contractor, but that would be a private dispute that the building should,
But
consider
can't the
consulting with an
city-
attorney on.
Can't the city say, I mean, if you submit a document to the city is swearing that something is true, how does that get rescinded? From the city's point of view, like how do we, all of a sudden it's no longer true?
I mean, I think that the challenge there would be the building department would have to do its own evaluation of what the facts are, what the conditions are on the property, and make a decision.
At that point, we had to install the post. We had a timeline, and so we went ahead and installed the post. We just didn't do it, without any information. We actually had a new engineering team to go and tell us what was the best spot to place the post without having spillage into the adjacent or neighboring properties, meeting all the other requirements except for the distance from the property line. So at that point, we went ahead and we installed them, everything with drawings, architectural drawings, everything that the city would normally request, and we installed them, and we were able to pass the certification.
But then you have to go now after the fact, having to go and get these approvals, these variances from the Board of Adjustment.
Correct, yes.
And how much is that costing your association?
Well, at this point, just the certification, we had to pass a special assessment to all the unit owners. We have 60 unit owners, majority of them are elderly, living on Social Security, and we have to pass a special assessment of 10 years. So on top of that, now we have to pay a variance to be able to, get everything in accordance.
And how much is the variance for your building?
I believe they told us $18,000.
How much?
$18,000.
$18,000. That's just for the city's part of the variance. That doesn't include the engineer that you need to hire or the drawings or anything like that. That's just for the bureaucratic side of the city.
Correct. And it's a 50-50 chance because we could still, the variance is the process of going to the variance. We might still get denied the variance at the end. So for us, it's a 50-50 chance of paying $18,000, paying engineers, paying materials, so we have to relocate them and at that point, we really can't afford it. It was a hardship on the owners.
¿Y cuál es la situación económica de los residentes de su edificio cuando uno le presenta a ellos tener que hacer un assessment de $18,000?
Bueno, como le dije, nosotros salimos de un board anterior que dejó el edificio en mala situación. De hecho, está un caso por introducirse con el investigador Pimentel, acá en la ciudad de Miami, de acuerdo al informe de auditoría que se hizo. O sea, el edificio no tenemos las condiciones ahorita económicas para poder solventar todo estos gastos adicionales que estaban fuera, digamos, de lo planificado, ¿no?
Let him translate and then we can bring this information.
At this point, just to translate, the community doesn't have the funds. They're struggling. Like I said, it's mostly elder community that lives there. They've been unit owners, most of them from the development time. They're living on Social Security, and at this point, we cannot force them to have another special assessment on top of what we currently have. It'll be a struggle for them.
Right. And so I asked them to come and present before the committee because I think this is representative of what other struggling associations might be encountering. Scrupulous contractors, irresponsible boards, or bad management in the past, in addition to then having to deal with the expensive bureaucracy of being able to get their approvals just to be able to comply with the recertification of their building. A recertification of their building, which usually these are safety requirements that are required of them. And so I think this situation that's happened with this building is just but one example of many other situations that are happening in our community. And this legislation could potentially provide some financial relief to struggling individuals in our community to be able to maintain their properties, especially individuals living on fixed incomes and our elderly. So with that, I welcome feedback from the dais. Commissioner Bott.
So I like this idea a lot. I think it makes sense. We're trying to help people and incentivize them to try to make the changes that we need them to for collective safety. I'm curious to know how you think the process would work. You say in here that the commission would approve these waivers, the waivers of the fees, and so I worry that we're going to become a glorified zoning board if this is something that there are a lot of requests for. Is it something that can be handled administratively or done in sort of a collective, or done on consent, like it gets provided to us, here are the 5 properties, here's the total, we think these 3 are great, we think these 2 don't qualify, and then, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but I do want to, time is so precious on commission meetings.
Right.
Anyhow.
And I believe, and I'll defer to the administration, I believe it was the recommendation of the administration that any decision to waive fees for variances, applications, it should be approved, it should be up to the city commission. I think, the subject of the variance, that would still be part of the jurisdiction of the BOA. But what would actually come to the commission itself would be the consideration of the fee waiver. And Tom, I don't know if you want to expand as to the administrative recommendation, as to the city commission be the one to approve the waiver of the fees.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll just add to that, that after looking at this carefully, we would recommend that any waiver of fees be under the sole purview of the commission. From a procedural standpoint, I believe these types of requests could potentially be done as part of a consent agenda. We don't anticipate that there would be a lot of these, and the commission could decide on a case-by-case basis whether or not a fee would be appropriate to waive or not. There may be circumstances where it wouldn't be appropriate to waive the fee, but there would be a number of circumstances potentially where the waiver of the fee would be appropriate.
And an application, and an association would make an application to the planning board for a fee waiver, and then the administration would place that on a consent agenda with either a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation for us to accept.
Correct.
Okay. And does that satisfy the city attorney's office? Would this process satisfy the city attorney's office?
Yes.
All right. Are there any other comments from the dais?
I know this is well-intended, and I applaud that. I wonder if there's any proof of financial hardship that's required, because I think this is well-intended. What I don't want is for it to be abused by people who don't need the help when so many people could. Is there a possibility to add a requirement to show?
If you wanted to include a provision for the application containing a statement of financial hardship, you could certainly do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm happy to include that as part of the requirements of this. I'm happy to include that. But in all reality, I really do believe that when a variance is to get individuals to comply with 40-year recertifications, anything that we can do to reduce costs, frankly, we should be doing. And so, they're already going through a bureaucratic process. And we want to encourage individuals to do this and to deal with as few extra costs as possible. And so I just don't want an association, just because they might not necessarily have a financial hardship, they may have already been dealing with fraudulent contractors, and it doesn't mean that they haven't already been victimized by a failed system. And for example, individuals report things all the time to DBPR. They might not be a financially struggling association, but that doesn't mean individuals haven't been victimized by bad contractors, by bad engineers, by individuals who work together. You do a report saying something is unsafe, and I come on the other side and I'm going to try to get the business in order to fix it. And, and I'm a relative of the management company, and, we know these things happen. And so even if individuals are not financially in peril, they've become victims. And I think, this is one of the few things we can do to help those individuals, even if they're not the ones that are, the most cash-strapped.
So I agree with that. But what I don't want is people to just think that it is as of right that they can come and get these fees waived, right? There needs to be some kind of, we've been trying to do it, but terrible circumstances happened, or, where we have financial constraints or whatever. Like, I just don't want some super wealthy building that has not had any bugs in the system to have an issue.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros y decir todo lo que ha pasado. Lamento mucho que tienen esa experiencia. From what I gathered, the city administration said this wasn't a blanket. It was case by case. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there would be a worry that there would be a rubber stamp of people getting this through. I agree with you that, Mr. Chair, it's so important as a community to try to help, because not only are buildings doing 40 and 50-year recertifications, but now the state and county has other requirements. They're having to fund reserves. Now, because of hurricanes in the city, insurance has gone up 200%. So any little bit that we can do to help the condominiums is really important.
Yeah.
And if not, we're gonna only become, again, a city where only rich people can afford to live in. And you might not be poor, but that doesn't mean that you know, have a huge savings account to be able to get now another assessment and pay for something extra. You know, Mr. Attorney, I just want to ask you something else, because again, a lot of times, you know, it's not just the cost of these applications, but it's also the timing. And sometimes, you know, right now, the BOA doesn't have the biggest agenda, but these things change over time, so we go through cycles of these things. Could we make sure that when these applications go before our boards, as it relates to applications that are to comply with these recertifications, that they take priority consideration on the agenda of those boards?
We can include that.
Okay. And if there's no opposition from the committee, I'd like to include that in the legislation, because that way we don't hold back these individuals who are actually our residents in our city. Okay? Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none in person, any via Zoom? None via Zoom. Commissioner Bada, and then we'll move the item.
No, I just want to say, I think we're having some technical issues with Zoom, and not everybody in the public can hear or see what's going on, so I just want to make sure, I don't know if it's been resolved yet, or,
All right, our city attorney,
I do see people on Zoom.
the question is, can they see or hear us? Because I've had two people say that they couldn't.
all right, so while they figure that out, is there a motion on the table for item number 3?
I'll move it as amended.
Okay, moved as amended, seconded by the chair. Can we show this adopted by acclamation? Wonderful. Thank you.
No,
Thank
gracias
you.
a ustedes por escucharnos en este espacio y ya, gracias a Dios, el caso está en un caso criminal del board anterior de la gestión. Pero muchas gracias por darnos este espacio de escucharnos.
Y gracias a ustedes por traer su inquietud ante nosotros. Es un deber de nosotros servirle a ustedes y ojalá esto le dé alivio a aquellas asociaciones que están lidiando con problemas económicos como la suya. Muchas gracias. Gracias. All right, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 4.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 4 is discuss amending the notice requirements for amendments to the land development regulations and comprehensive plan to permit the city to use a publicly accessible website hosted by Miami-Dade County as an alternate means of publishing notices and advertisements which are currently required to be published in a newspaper of general circulation.
Commissioner Suarez, this is your favorite theme of legislation
Yes, it is.
after voters.
Saving taxpayers their money. Nick, maybe you can also speak to this. These are some of the loopholes that we are closing up as far as saving on notices as it relates to papers of general news circulation.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So recently, the Florida legislature adopted a law that allows local governments to publish newspaper notice on a website, a publicly accessible website hosted by Miami-Dade County. The cost of publishing notices on the county's website is considerably lower than publishing in the newspaper. This is a companion ordinance to other ordinances that the City Commission has passed or is currently considering to allow the city to publish notices on amendments to the comprehensive plan or amendments to the land development regulations on the county website instead of in the newspaper.
And through the chair, I move my item.
I second you. Moved by Commissioner Suarez, seconded by Commissioner Dominguez. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item? None in person, none on Zoom. Can we show this adopted by acclamation? All right. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 6.
Okay, item number 6 is explore zoning incentives and identify appropriate zoning districts to encourage the development of schools and other educational facilities.
Commissioner Suarez, this is an item we sponsored together to consider potential zoning incentives to encourage the development of schools and other educational facilities. You're welcome to introduce this.
Yeah, I think the last time we touched base on this, we had a sunshine meeting, no, actually, we had a meeting here, and then we thought it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And so I would welcome staff to see what you have recommended to really incentivize our idea.
Okay, I can go ahead and go over that. As Commissioner Suarez mentioned, the last time this was discussed at land use, the administration presented an initial set of potential incentives, and the direction of the committee was to take a look at those and come up with even more robust incentives. Some of the additional more robust incentives that we've come up with include the following: removal of mandatory design review board approval for education facilities up to a certain height and intensity threshold, and the transfer of the site plan and design review approval to staff. Number two would be eligible educational facilities may request a commission warrant for an increase in allowable intensity, FAR, and building height. Item number three, eligible educational facilities may request a commission warrant for reductions in setbacks, open space, lot coverage, and similar development regulations that would avoid the need to request a variance from either the Board of Adjustment or the applicable land use board. Number four, in commercial and high-intensity zoning districts, conditional use approval would not be required for eligible educational facilities. And item number five, eligible educational facilities will have no minimum off-street parking requirement. This would not prohibit schools from providing off-street parking, but it would not mandate a certain minimum number of spaces. Regarding applications that may be located in local historic districts, there may be a way to also forego the need for HPB approval. If there is direction to move in that area, we would just want to do a little bit more research to make sure that such a change did not run afoul of the requirements of the city charter.
Commissioner Suarez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, one of the schools that are opening up Base Camp 305, they went through significant challenges through the HPB, and I think it cost them to the tune of millions of dollars, and just simple design changes that kept on becoming before them when they went to the board, and to the point where the operator was very, very frustrated about the whole process. And I certainly would be okay with removing the approval process from HPB and the DRB specifically for schools up into a certain height or standard. Tom, and through the chair, what other things could we add? Have you left anything off the table?
We had also identified previously things that are outside the development review arena, and that includes things like potentially providing for on-street parking spaces to use as drop-off and pickup without requiring a fee, potentially providing city parks and recreational facilities for use of the students of a school during certain times of the day. Those were a couple of the additional things that we had come up with.
I think certainly the provision of on-street parking spaces, if they're available, and they can be administratively approved, is something that I think could help a number of schools, especially when they're, outside of a commercial corridor. I think it's one of the things that it's a no-brainer to offer these schools. Commissioner Bond.
I like the idea of encouraging more schools to state their claim here in Miami Beach. I do worry a little bit about the parking for staff, especially since some of these schools would be smaller. They'd be potentially in residential neighborhoods. I'm thinking just in the areas where I walk the dogs up in North Beach, there are a couple of schools that are, tucked away in the middle of 100% residential areas, and I worry that the people who work there aren't going to have a place to park because they don't have adjacent parking facilities. There's no lot up there. So I just don't know how we handle that exactly.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I think the infrastructure is already there, Commissioner Bott. The residential spaces, I think, go into effect, not go into effect, they go out of effect where they're non-residential from 7 to 6 p.m. And so if you're in school, you can park in a residential neighborhood until 6 p.m. School usually gets out at 2:30, maybe 3:30 for some private schools. So I think there's adequate parking if it's in or near a residential neighborhood. I know there's a 2-hour maximum wait or 2-hour where you have to move the car one space, I'm sure we can maybe make a provision where if you are a teacher at that school or staff, you're not bound by that requirement to move your car every 2 hours. But, you know, from what I understand, there's plenty of parking during the day. It's at night when there's a constraint on parking.
I think just maybe between now and wherever this goes next, we just do a little gut check on the parking situation during the day, because I've never looked at it with this, through this lens of, oh, are there plenty of places to park during the day? You know, I look at it sort of like, where are contractors parking? But I don't see big blocks that are just empty. And I just want to make sure that we're not assuming something when, you know, if that's the case, that's great. If not, let's just figure out how to solve that issue.
Yeah.
And Tom, did we make any concession on FAR or height?
It's one of the recommendations in our item is to, for them to be able to request a commission warrant.
Correct.
Both for height and for FAR, which I think is part of what we discussed in our Sunshine meeting.
Okay.
And how would that commission warrant, work, Tom?
What we would do is if the land use committee endorses this, we could either bring back a draft ordinance to the committee or bring a draft ordinance to the commission for referral to the planning board. And under the warrant process, we would set up a procedure for the commission to consider warrants for the increase in FAR specific to educational facilities, as well as any other development regulation relief.
Like setbacks, open spaces, lot coverage, and height.
Correct.
And in those commercial districts where schools may be looking to open up at, the conditional use approval would no longer be required as part of the recommendations. Today, a conditional use is required, but we're trying to incentivize this. So we're saying, if you want to open a school, and let's say you're not asking for a warrant or anything like this, you wouldn't have to go through the conditional use bureaucratic process that you would have to go through today.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
So do we want to refer to back to land use, or?
I think let's have it move forward. We don't
Yeah.
need it moving back, we need it moving forward for
Okay.
the good of our educational community.
So it goes to the planning board next with the draft?
We'll bring it to the commission, draft ordinance to the commission for referral to the planning board.
I'll second Commissioner Suarez's motion.
Yes.
All right. Can we show this adopted by acclamation? All right. Excellent. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 7.
Okay, item number 7 is discuss and consider adopting a Live Better program, including zoning and other incentives to promote attainable housing solutions in Miami Beach for middle-income individuals and families.
All right, thank you, Mr. Director. One of our community's biggest challenges is the rising cost of living, and particularly housing. Middle-income families have increasingly been squeezed out of the market, a trend seen nationwide, but I think that especially holds true in cities like ours here in Miami Beach, where the demand for housing is high and availability of affordable workforce and attainable housing is extremely low. The financial struggles faced by families in our area, including Miami Beach, is widely and frequently reported on. Our area's cost of living is 30% higher than the national average, and sadly, we are one of the most financially stretched cities in the United States, even surpassing New York, LA, and San Francisco. To address this, I am sponsoring legislation to create the Live Better program aimed at providing rental housing for Miami Beach residents from lower income families to what is new here as part of a legislative intent, which is the missing middle. So we're not forgetting about the lower income families, but we're going beyond lower income. We're going beyond workforce to address this segment of the population that is appropriately named the missing middle, because everyone forgets about and everyone misses to address, both of whom are being priced out of the market. The missing middle are people who earn too much to qualify for affordable housing, but earn too little to afford market rate or luxury housing. This policy is intended to guide all future development incentives in our city. At any time the City Commission considers new residential incentives, I feel there should be a minimum standard or threshold that is consistently applied. And to establish a clear and measurable benchmark for future developments, I'm proposing that we create a definition for attainable housing. And this would provide clarity and set a consistent reference point for developers and decision makers, including our land use boards. Right now, our residents are at risk of being priced out of our city. This program is aimed as a direct response to the challenge and aims to create a sustainable pipeline of affordable and attainable options for everyone. Part of our problem is the lack of new inventory in our city that is attainable rental inventory. Most of new projects in Miami Beach are luxury developments, and simply limiting the unit size, I feel, does not guarantee that rental prices will be affordable or moderate. And just yesterday at our retreat, we were hearing about how on a public piece of property with subsidized financing, we were seeing a 500 square foot unit, I think they were saying was over 2,500 rent that was being asked for. So it goes to indicate that even when it's subsidized, even when it's public property, limiting a unit size doesn't necessarily equate to attainable rental rates. One of the objectives of this policy is to incentivize developments that specifically cater to renters, providing them with modern amenities typically found in luxury developments here in Miami Beach at a more accessible price point. Additionally, the proposal contemplates zoning changes, financial incentives, and regulatory adjustments that make it easier and more attractive to build housing that meets the needs of our workforce and middle-income households. To ensure this policy is community-informed, we intend to launch a community housing needs assessment survey to gather valuable input for residents. For example, what are our housing needs of our residents? How much is our workforce earning, those individuals who are leaving our city at 5 o'clock? How much are they earning, and at what price point can they afford to rent so that we can create that type of inventory here in Miami Beach? How much are they currently spending on housing off the beach so that we know what's our target point of what we need to develop in our city to cater to that workforce? And that will help us refine this policy and ensure that we accurately legislate something that reflects the needs and the desires of the people who not only live here, but who also work here. So my commitment is that for this not only to be a policy, but for this to be a vision for Miami Beach, a vision for Miami Beach that remains vibrant and accessible for everyone. And with that, I want to recognize our planning director to guide us further on how we further develop this policy and how we can really create something that creates not only rental housing, but rental housing that serves the needs of those who are being pushed out of our community.
Sure, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Concurrent with the development of a definition for attainable housing by establishing the appropriate AMI, the comprehensive survey that the chair spoke about will go a long way in informing the drafting of policy that will implement a Live Better program. And the drafting of that policy would be based upon creating incentives for actually building this type of housing. One of the things that we face, not just in South Florida and Florida, but nationally, is the lack of attainable housing, the lack of housing for the middle, the forgotten middle. And nationally, what we've seen is finding ways to incentivize the building of that is one of the best ways to address it. When the appropriate survey is completed and it informs the types of incentives that can be developed, we can then begin to identify the most appropriate locations to incentivize the building of this type of housing. And so we think that by first having the results of a survey, defining the parameters of that survey, and then having the results of that survey, we can then come back to the committee with more informed recommendations on potential policies that would be true incentives for this type of housing.
Wonderful. And just to give the public, just for those that don't have the survey, we're asking the public in this survey, both our residents and those who work in our city, their current housing situation, whether they own or rent, the type of housing that they live in, how long they've been in their current housing, how much their monthly rent or mortgage is, whether they own or they rent, what size housing are they most in need of, what are the most important features that they look for when making a housing decision. For some people, it's not just affordability. Some people really need, laundry in their units, and not everyone offers that. Or for other people, it's proximity to public transportation. Or for other people, it's proximity to work or schools, or others is community amenities. How much space do people need in order to live comfortably? And other questions that can help guide this policy. And again, to the chair's point, to the director's point, what we seek to define here is an appropriate AMI. Through the outcome of the survey, what would be an appropriate AMI for attainable housing units, and add these to the provisions of our city code. Identify those areas based on the responses that we get from the survey. Identify the areas in our city where we should be directing these incentives to. Identify what would be the proper zoning incentives, and identify, other incentives that may be needed besides zoning, whether it's city fees, or certain administrative reviews for projects that meet the definition of attainable housing. With that, I'm going to open the floor to my colleagues. I welcome your feedback, and you all are going to be an important part of this process.
So I think this is a great initiative, and I applaud you for thinking about how to address this. I think it's terrific. I'm very curious to see what the feedback is from the survey. One of the things I would suggest, a small tweak on the survey, is the question about which are the most important features that you look for. I would actually ask them to rank it, not just identify. And the other question I had is how are you who's going to be asked to answer these surveys? Are we hiring an external source provider to do this? Or are we doing this internally? I want to obviously make sure there are no short-term rentals allowed, even if the buildings are built in a short-term rental zone. I mean, right? We can proffer whatever the development becomes. We can proffer that, and we have control over that.
Sure.
But I'm very curious to see where this goes. It's a great initiative, so thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank my office staff, Monica Matos-Salinas, and also Cara Petrella, who have been meeting with the city administration and other stakeholders on how to properly do this. We have three options on how we could potentially do this. One option would be to do an online city-led and city-hosted survey. That would be one option. The other option would be a university-led, in-person survey, or the alternative would be a consultant-led survey. I don't feel we should be paying money for this, but I also like the independence of not only having the city do it, but having a university come in, reach out to the neighborhood, meet with the neighborhood, canvass neighborhoods, for a university from an academic level to conduct this outreach. And I see we have Dr. Rosenfeld in the audience. And I don't know if Dr. Rosenfeld, if you mind, if I recognize you, to guide us on how university-led partnership could be framed to get the most valuable data to help guide this policy. No, now you're on.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Leslie Rosenfeld, Chief Education Officer. Chair Fernandez, I was listening to what you're seeking based on, and the conversations I've had with your staff. If there is a desire to partner with a university, we currently do have very robust partnerships with many universities here in South Florida. We hire their students as paid interns throughout the year, and they're very successful partnerships. So perhaps with the information that's been developed, we can reach to our university partners, gauge their interest in working with us and providing an opportunity for their students, perhaps in a specific school at a university, and then determine next steps.
Great. Well, and I know that our Office of Education and Performance Initiatives, which you lead very professionally, and I thank you for that because it really is one of the highlights of our city government. You have partnerships with UM, with FIU that we've explored in the past. FIU has the Office of Research and Economic Development. UM also has the Office of Civic and Community Engagement, and perhaps those are entities that we could look at. Because I do think I do think that there are several benefits to a university-led survey. I think this approach can enhance the credibility of what we're doing. I think a lot of times when the public hears of initiatives led by the government having to do with zoning policies, they're always very skeptical. And this isn't led by developers. This is led by a desire to address the housing needs of our residents and our workforce. And the policy needs to originate from the feedback of those residents and workforce. And I think if we have a university-led survey, residents may be more likely to participate in the survey, viewing it more impartially and more as a more trustworthy source. In addition to the fact that I think universities may have access to grants and funding sources that could potentially support a survey initiative, and hopefully reducing what would be the financial impact to the city. And so I don't know, Mr. Director, what direction do you need from the committee today? Is it a recommendation back to the City Commission to engage in the survey and based on the outcome of that survey to craft the policies in items 1 through 4?
Yeah, I think that would be good, and perhaps you want to leave the item on the land use agenda, so at the completion of the survey, we can come back to the land use committee with some draft incentives.
Do we need to send this back to commission for any action at commission?
Yes, I think as to the survey, but I agree with Tom. I would keep the item in committee for, to continue working on the policy.
So it'd be proper to make a motion or to consider a motion at this time recommending a resolution to the City Commission approving conducting a survey, a university-led survey, with the outcomes of that survey to help craft items 1 through 4 in the summary of our agenda item that could then come back to the Land Use Committee. Is that what I'm hearing, Mr. Director?
Yeah, and basically you would be recommending through a resolution that the City Commission authorize the university-led survey, and number 2, that this item would be continued to a future date, so at the completion of the survey, we can come back to you with the policy recommendations based upon the survey.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll move it.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm sorry, is there any other committee input? I'm sorry, Commissioner Dominguez.
No, I know we want-
Oh, sorry.
I know we need to move the meeting along. We have a lot of things on here. But great job. I too was very impressed with the amount of work and time and effort that you've put into ensuring that the middle is accounted for and stays here in Miami Beach. And I too am looking forward to seeing the results of the survey. I like the creativity of having a university-led survey, so well done.
Thank you. And hopefully this can be an overarching policy for future policies in the future. Any other feedback, any comments from members of the public? Seeing none in person, none on Zoom. With that, we can show this item adopted. Mr. Director, let's move on to item number 8.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 8 is expedite the opening of the Baywalk and move the development of the Baywalk up on the GeoBond prioritization list and present the Baywalk plan to the Land Use Committee.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. And let's hear from David Gomez and hear what the progress is on the Baywalk and the pedestrian bridge, please.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here when I have good news. David Gomez, Director of Capital Improvements. The report I have for you today is that, as you may have seen in the LTC that went out recently, as well as the activity on site, the developer has mobilized to the pedestrian bridge site on the south side of Fifth Street at the Causeway. They've begun installing their MOT, and they will begin the process of relocating the underground utilities to make way for foundations in the bridge structure. Just as an update to the LTC that was sent, they currently took over part of the right turn lane coming off the Causeway. They will be reopening that intermittently when they're either not on site or during the weekend, until they bring in the heavier equipment, that then they won't be able to keep that lane open. But they will be doing that intermittently to try to keep the lane open as much as possible. This is the underground portion of it, or the utility relocate portion. We're still finalizing the permits for the structure itself, which we anticipate to have in the next couple of months, well ahead of them needing it in order to begin the structure and the foundations. The update for the Baywalk itself, the 10th to 12th Street Baywalk, they're actually in the final stages. They're installing the last of the beams and the walkways, and they remain on schedule to complete by the end of this month. That update was as recently as today. So it looks like we will be done before the end of the month.
What's going on with South Bay?
South Bay Club we actually had a meeting with their board last week. It is a new board, and they were not quite as open to the Baywalk as the previous board was. We did meet with the city attorney and their attorney, and we made some adjustments or tweaks to the easement agreement. We received assurances from their attorney that they will figure it out and move forward with it, but they are going through the process of getting it approved by their residents.
And what about Bayview Terrace?
Bayview Terrace and Bay Garden Manor. Bayview Terrace is in a similar situation as South Bay Club, in that we have an easement agreement in place, or excuse me, we've developed an easement agreement that they are reviewing. Bay Garden Manor is the building that was essentially purchased by a developer. They own most of the units, and they're looking to redevelop, so we're looking at that development proposal and what that means to the Baywalk itself.
Going back to South Bay Club, I thought we had a signed agreement already.
We have a signed agreement with a DRB order. The location of that original agreement is not ideal in terms of the seawall location and work that, potential future work that needs to happen for the seawall. So we had proposed adjusting the location of the easement to simplify that and make that a little cleaner. That's the revision that they're looking at. I did explain to the board that if they can't agree on the new layout, we'll just go back to the original
Right, because we
agreement.
have something signed and approved,
Correct.
so. And are there any expirations on that signed agreement or DRB order? I want to
Not-
make sure nothing lapses.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Can you double check?
Absolutely. But
Okay.
it is a recorded easement, so there shouldn't be an issue, but I will double
Okay,
check.
thank you. Colleagues?
I'm just very excited about the mobilization that happened Monday. Commissioner Dominguez, you kept the iron hot on this. And I see Hector is here from the developers team, and the fact that we've reached this point that the utilities and the trees are being relocated to make way for the bridge. It's good movement. It is very welcome to good news and good movement. So I'm happy.
If I could just add one more thing, just in the last few minutes, you should have received the save the date invitation for a potential
got it.
groundbreaking. So we are scheduling that in coordination with the developers, public information folks.
And I just want to say again, because your persistence, Commissioner Dominguez, you placed this item on the agenda month after month after month. You've been putting the pressure on, and it's ultimately been to the residents' benefit. Now, after years of waiting, people kept on asking us, what's going on with that bridge? And it was on Channel 10 yesterday. It was on World Red Eye, on social media, and we can finally say, it's finally moving forward. So thank you for your persistence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it actually precedes me because our late Commissioner Mark Samuelin was leading the charge on getting the Baywalk completed and the Ped Bridge, so it's like, wow, we're here. I do have one other question. I got a meeting request from the Icon and the Bentley Bay. What concerns do they have? Have they reached out to you?
If they've reached out to the team, I haven't heard it yet.
Okay.
I think I did see
They
something
reached
about it.
out wanting a meeting about the Ped Bridge, so I'm just curious.
I'll double check and find out what that's about. I'm not up to speed on it.
Okay.
Commissioner Dominguez,
What?
you just mentioned something. This bridge has, you've led the charge on it, continue pushing it forward, but we know why you've led this charge, because it was something so important to our late friend and dear colleague, Mark Samuelian. And, you know, since we're in the sunshine and we don't have these opportunities that often, maybe it'd be a beautiful tribute, since it was something that he pushed for so much, to think about dedicating this bridge in his honor, and something that we should.
Naming it for him.
Naming it for him.
I would be thrilled with that. You're gonna make me cry. If it's something that could be brought to the full commission for a vote.
I would happily sponsor that, co-sponsor that with you.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think we should work on a referral for that, because, you know, it really, you're doing it, but you do it with heart. This is not just a political item for you. It's something that you really have fought for with so much energy, with so much passion, month after month, dealing with the bureaucracy. But you do it in the name of our dear colleague, our dear friend, who's not here pushing for it, but is here present through you pushing for it. And I think it's the right thing to do as this project moves forward.
Thank you.
So I think we could show that by acclamation. Let's show that recommendation to the city commission, so that when this is finally up, we can have this there in his name and honor.
That sounds amazing.
All right. So by acclamation, let's do that.
Might have to be just the Mark Bridge, because it's a short bridge.
It's some well,
Mark Samuelin.
some, you know.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. With that, anything else with this item, Mr. Director?
No, and I think that this will be moved to the February meeting for an additional update, correct?
Excellent.
Okay.
Yes. All right.
Yay.
Thank you, David.
Well, we're fuzzy now.
Yes, we like that. All right. Let's call up item number 10, Mr. Director.
Okay, item number 10 is monthly updates on historic hotel redevelopment on Collins Avenue between 14th and 20th Street, including an overview of pending permits and progress updates from development teams.
All right, and this is an item that I placed on the agenda, because we have so many buildings that are part of our iconic skyline that are under construction.
Held up by sticks, I think was your phrase.
Yes, held up by sticks, being held up by sticks. And, you know, it not only affects the historic character of our community, we're certainly very happy that investments are being made in these buildings, but their delayed closure does have an impact on our community, on the businesses, and on our overall just quality of life dealing with those construction sites. So our planning department have reached out to these property owners, and Tom, I believe you have an update of where we are with these different construction projects.
Yes, Mr. Chair. In terms of the permitted projects that are on the list that was provided in the Land Use Committee memo, the Delano Hotel at 1685 Collins Avenue is a fully active construction site. 90% of the new windows have been installed, and they are processing a revision permit. They have indicated that construction continues at full speed and that they are trying to complete the renovation as soon as possible. Regarding the Raleigh, Richmond, and South Seed site at 1751 to 1775 Collins Avenue, there is currently no active construction work taking place on the site. The facades of the historic Richmond and South Seas hotels are braced, and the Raleigh is completely boarded up. Although the site has a construction fence, like I said, that there is no construction taking place. A private provider is being used for the construction work, and apparently they have an inspection deadline of February of 2025, and they have to complete an inspection report to the satisfaction of the building official in order for that permit to be extended. Staff has reached out to representatives of the developer, but we were not able to make contact regarding any more detailed information or status update. The Shelburne Hotel at 1801 Collins Avenue is a fully active construction site, and they are proceeding with the construction there. And then finally, the Bulgari Hotel, which is the old historic Seagull. Although no active construction work is taking place now, exterior demolition of the non-contributing ancillary buildings has been completed. The building is secured and boarded up, and there is a construction fence installed. Our staff has met with the project team as recently a few weeks ago to discuss the project, and they were advised that the project is moving forward. The applicant actually went back to the Historic Preservation Board in November to receive approval for the reconstruction of the porte cochere.
I just want us to note, it's a good problem when you have investments in your city, but I just want us to note, in a, like 4 or 5 block period, you have 1, 2, 3, we have 6 buildings that are being held up by sticks, where you have no economic activity going on. And again, it's more than just economic activity. God forbid something happens in the economy. And so, I just think we need to consider, phased approaches. How do we work in the future so that you don't end up in a short area like this with 6 empty buildings, with no economic activity, that God forbid something happens and you end up, with 6 buildings, significant buildings in a important corridor completely boarded up. Commissioner Bond. Vice Mayor Bond.
I want to actually ask for my own edification. When those buildings are held up by sticks, we all know they're more than sticks, but are those trusses designed to withstand hurricanes? What happens, not just the economic impact, but if those 6 buildings were wiped out in a storm? Now, understanding caveats, storms can take out fully built buildings, I got that. But, that is a significant loss to our historic infrastructure. So what happens? Are there any contingencies or any benchmarks? Are there requirements to withstand up to a Category 2 storm? How does that work?
My understanding is that the shoring and bracing used is designed to withstand hurricane force winds.
Up to
what category, I don't know. I would need to get back to you with that information, but my understanding is that they are designed to withstand very substantial hurricane force winds. If something happened, either through a hurricane force wind or other means where those remaining portions of the building became compromised and they had to be either demolished or further reduced, they would have to go back to the Historic Preservation Board, and the Historic Preservation Board would have to re-review the project to determine whether or not they were going to require the portions that were removed to be replicated and reconstructed, or whether or not they would require a different direction be moved in.
Okay.
Mr. Attorney, Mr. Director, in the future, how can we pace this? I just don't think it's good. It's a good approach. Again, we welcome the investment. We encourage the investment. We want the rehabilitation and the improvement of property. But how do we pace this so that we don't have entire blocks of an entire corridor closed off? We see what it's done to, in this case, through demolition by neglect, but in North Beach, you have a significant, that's their one property. Here, you're talking about 6 properties, 6 buildings. How do we take a more measured approach in the past?
Future.
In the future. How we take a more measured approach in the future, Mr. Attorney?
I think the biggest challenge here, as the committee knows, is these are all private developments, each one by a different owner. These are not city-led projects, so at the end of the day, it's up to the property owner, it's up to their contractors, it's up to the economics of the moment in time of the financing they're able to obtain or not, to push these projects along. And we really have little to no control over the timing of construction activities.
This is a very risky proposition. It's very risky to oversee. I mean, I think part of what has made Lincoln Road suffer over the past few years, yeah, I think it started with the closure of the convention center during while it was being fixed up, and then the closure of these hotels. All this is, economic activity that deprives that's being deprived of the businesses of the area. So, thank you for the update. I think we need to reach out again to the rally, the Richmond and the South Seas. If hopefully their representative is watching, and I would tell the representative,
Call us back.
answer the phone.
Do you want to move this to the next month?
Yeah, let's
And,
continue.
we will
Yes.
reach out to the developers again and ask them if they could provide this committee with an update.
Yes, that representative does not want to become persona non grata of the committee.
And I would say, if I may, through the chair, not for nothing, but even if it's not a historic property, which comes with its own opportunities and challenges, but, up in North Beach around 71st Street and Indian Creek, we've got a bunch of things that are incompletion or almost complete, semi-complete, just starting, construction fences abound. It's not a great look. I mean, if you want to talk about revitalizing economic development and encouraging people to come here, it's, we talk about the entranceways to our city, our thoroughfares at some length yesterday and this morning, and, it's some of the most crucial, I don't know what the plural is for nexi of our city. You've got more than one pretty significant thing happening at a time, and I think that's just something we need to keep in mind as we go forward. It complicates traffic. It's unpleasant for people who live there, have businesses there. It's a thing
Yep.
that we should keep in mind.
Yep. Tom, for next month, I also want an update on the Bancroft. I think one of the first items that Commissioner Bott and I, Vice Mayor Bott and I voted on as colleagues, we were both members of the planning board. And we were all still wearing masks. It was during the COVID time. And we were all very excited to be voting for this transformative project, Class A office space at the Bancroft.
Yep.
And how many years ago was that already, Commissioner Bott?
Too many to count.
Too many to count.
4 or 5.
Notwithstanding our youth.
No, I mean perpetually young, but 4 or 5 years, yeah.
At least four or 5 years since, and it seems like the property just sits there in an idle state.
Yeah.
And at least before you had the taco place there, at least there was a restaurant there. Like now it just sits there empty. This is the Bancrofts. And so, something spectacular was promised there. And the area merits something spectacular. And so, yeah, we need an update of what's going on with that. And frankly, I mean, we got to start thinking, if we give approvals to individuals and then they empty buildings and the buildings just sit there, we have to think, how many more approvals are we going to give this person? And maybe it's something, maybe we can address things from that angle. If you've gotten an approval and you've emptied a building and you already have a building that's sitting empty, we might not give you future approvals until you have real activity going on at your other side. Because again, we just cannot afford to sustain a community with empty construction sites. So, Nick, I need you to put on your thinking cap on that because we may need to work on policy regarding this. And Kara, we need to follow up on that. All right? Okay? Thank you, guys. Let's introduce item number 11.
Okay, item number 11 is discuss as applicable zoning incentives for non-transient, long-term residential development, establishing a policy that whenever a covenant restricting transient uses on a property is submitted as a condition of eligibility for residential zoning incentives, that the covenant shall require a 6/7 supermajority of the entire city commission before the covenant may be released or amended in such a manner as to weaken a restriction on the transient use of the property.
So this is an item that I've introduced. Back in November, we were considering at the city commission a residential uses ordinance, which was applicable to all zoning district where non-transient residential uses were being incentivized. And as part of that ordinance, I proposed and the sponsor accepted language to include a covenant requirement so that when a covenant is being put into place and then it's going to be removed in the future, that it require a 6/7 requirement. That if you're saying you're proffering by covenant that you're not going to have short-term rentals, and then you come back in the future and you say you want to have short-term rentals, then it not be a simple majority that could do that away. That it be a 6/7 supermajority of the city commission that say we're going to reverse that covenant. And we were able to put it on one ordinance, and I want to thank Commissioner Dominguez for accepting my amendment and for your teamwork and collegiality to introduce that language there while this was going through the process. But the idea is to put this on all future covenants, to have this requirement in all future covenants that restrict transient uses on properties, not just those related to residential use incentives. And so, Tom, I want to recognize you to walk us through the text amendment we have in front of us.
Sure. In the land use memo, we've drafted a new section under Chapter 7. And specifically, it would be Section 7.1.1.2, which would be covenant restricting transient uses on a property. And although similar language is included in the recently adopted amendments creating 7.1.111 for the residential use incentives, by establishing a separate standalone requirement under a different section, this would be applicable to not just those projects that avail themselves of existing and future residential use incentives, but any other type of project that may include a transient use incentive that may not be part of that section. This would basically be a catch-all for all of those. So if there is consensus on this, we can take a draft LDR amendment to the commission for referral to the planning board.
All right. Is there questions from the dais on this item? Is there a motion on the item?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Vice Mayor Bud Suarez and seconded by Commissioner Dominguez. So I think by acclamation, we're adopting this.
We're there.
Yes. Is there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? None in person, none via Zoom, and I apologize. I missed the public comment on the last couple of items, and I apologize for that. But we can show this item adopted by acclamation. All right. Commissioner Suarez, you're speaking so much today. You're taking up all of our time. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 12.
Okay, item number 12 is review the current loading requirements and how to mitigate the impacts of loading and deliveries on traffic congestion and residents' quality of life, including without limitation, increased enforcement efforts, as well as legislative amendments.
And to introduce this very good item, I'm going to introduce Vice Mayor Bond.
I'm actually going to let Jose take the heavy lifting on this. This has been something we've worked on for a while. It is an issue with you know, seemingly simple, a truck or a lift or somebody pulls over to the side of the road to try to pick somebody up or drop something off, and it causes all kinds of jam ups, especially at rush hour. And so, instead of beating our heads against the wall about this, I thought we would try to put some actual plans in place. So, Jose, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Mayor, committee members, Jose Gonzalez, Transportation and Mobility Director, and Interim Parking Director. So the last time we were before you with this item, there were three components that we essentially discussed. The first was statistics for freight loading zone enforcement. The second was a pilot program that we have ongoing with Uber. And the third was some strategies that we're looking toward for automated curb management and optimization strategies. And so in terms of an update, I'll start with the first component, which is the freight loading zones. You may recall during the discussion, we discussed the two different types of towing that occurs for freight loading zones. Towing that occurs by the parking department, and then there's towing that also occurs by the police department. And so what we're doing is we're collaborating with police to try to increase our enforcement from both sides, the parking side as well as the police side. And I know that Major Morgallo is here as well if there are any questions regarding the police towing. But just to recap, when we look at parking department statistics between the last two fiscal years, in fiscal year 23, we towed, in terms of number of citations, it was 7,241 citations issued in fiscal year 23, and in fiscal year 24, it was 9,461. So a significant increase there between the two last fiscal years, and we're anticipating this fiscal year will also our goal is to surpass that number. I could also speak to an update on the pilot program with Uber that we conducted during Art Week, and it was actually very successful. We held a debrief meeting with Uber where they shared with us their heat maps. And if you recall, what we did was we established geo-fenced zones within the city at hotspots. Those included the convention center, of course, the Good Time Hotel on Washington Avenue, and the One Hotel on Collins and 23rd. Those are areas that typically have a lot of rideshare activity during Art Week, and activity which blocks travel lanes and causes a lot of congestion. So what we saw, according to the data that they shared with us, is that there was a concentration of activity at the geofenced locations, which is actually the purpose of the pilot versus all around it. For example, on Convention Center Drive, if we look at what happened last year versus what happened this year, last year there were a lot of pickups and drop-offs all along Convention Center Drive and even along 17th Street, creating congestion on 17th Street. This year, a lot of that was happening at the designated locations. And then similarly, there were other locations that were geofenced that were along the side streets of Collins Avenue rather than on Collins Avenue itself. And those were successful as well in terms of the activity occurring along the side streets where there's less traffic rather than on Collins Avenue, which, as we know, only has one lane in each direction in South Beach. I'm referring to the South Beach area. So it was very successful. Uber is very excited to continue the pilot. We actually continued it. We didn't really put a stop to it. So it's continuing. And what we'd like to do is expand it and work with them to identify additional locations throughout the city that could be designated and geofenced on their platform for rideshare activity.
Before you move on.
Yes.
Before you move on to another topic, a couple things. One is, can they share with us heat map data of non-special event week locations that get jammed up? Because I think it's one thing during Art Basel, and it sounds like it's working great, but, you know, what's it like during the regular year? You know, are there certain hotels that at like, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning, everybody leaves for their meetings wherever they're going or whatever it is? It would be interesting to see that so that we can, if there are opportunities to expand for regular usage, that would be great. And then also to expand to the other rideshare companies, specifically Lyft.
Correct, yes.
So-
We started our pilot with Uber, but it will expand to,
Yep.
to Lyft as well. And absolutely, we're continuing discussions with them, asking for some more information. Some of their information they will share with us, but it's not for public consumption. They're very careful about the information that they share. So that's why it was not part of this item. But that is our goal, is to continue working with them, expand the program to more locations, not just during a major special event. Art Week was just the pilot.
Proof of concept.
Exactly, exactly. And then in terms of automated curb space management and optimization strategies, we have a few conversations going on with different vendors, including our own vendor. We currently have a vendor that can provide automated curb management strategies, and so we're very excited about that. It's gonna take a few more conversations with our current partner, as well as some other vendors that are out there that provide these types of services, to see which is the best fit for the city. And I think at some point in the in the next few months, we hope to bring to you some semblance of a plan that may or may not require a procurement for these services. But the good news is our current vendor can actually provide these services. And what that does is it manages our limited curb space. There's a high demand on our curb space for different uses, from rideshare to loading to passenger pickup, Uber Eats, you name it. So what this does is it monetizes our curb based on demand, and provides the technology and the infrastructure to be able to enforce that.
I just wanted to hear from our colleagues in the police department how things are going from your perspective. We talked about maybe there's an opportunity for improvements, and so.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, Daniel Morgallo, Assistant Chief of the Police Department on behalf of police. So under Chief Jones's guidance, one of the things that we've initiated is expanding our FLZ enforcement beyond just our motor unit support, which has primarily been the method that we've used to support FLZ enforcement. So we will be expanding FLZ enforcement throughout all of our uniform patrol and citywide. Part of the implementation process is to conduct a brief roll call training with officers that aren't familiar with FLZ enforcement, so they understand the mission and what's expected. And then we should be able to have much more of an impact on traffic conditions by keeping the FLZs clear. And then the trucks will have somewhere to park without obstructing traffic. So we should have a much more of an impact than we have in the past.
So the notion is that anytime any officer sees somebody blocking an FLZ or impeding the flow of traffic, they will be trained enough to mitigate that, either, you know, moving them along and giving them a break, or writing a ticket, or whatever.
Correct.
Well, sometimes you want to be nice and give them a break if they're complete idiots, but,
Yeah.
but to, or warning is what I meant, not a complete break, but, and so when do you think that will start happening? When do you?
So I know that I've spoken to some of our area captains. I'll be coordinating with our major to conduct the training over the next few weeks. It's very brief, and we should have everything up and running within a couple of weeks.
So you guys are gonna need to coordinate, so Jose, as you keep advancing what you're doing with the rideshare and with the loading zone automated program and all that kind of stuff, then make sure that everybody has the most up-to-date information. And then also, another layer on top of this is an item that's gonna come before us in February to the commission, about when people come before the special magistrate and they say, but Your Honor, I had no idea, which is annoying because they're, you know, they think they can just get out of things. We're going to be asking anybody who does business in the city to, you know, have an affirmation that they are educating their drivers of what is proper and what is not proper. And if they can't conform to what is proper in our city, given the space that we have, then they need to think about using different sized trucks or coming at different times or whatever. So, you know, it's the Swiss cheese theory, right? Like none of this is going to solve everything by itself, but once you layer all the different pieces, then you have fewer holes. So that's what we're hoping for.
Excellent.
Thank you for the update.
I'm just gonna use the opportunity since we have the parking department in front of us. I just got a text message from, actually the second complaint I've received in one day, from residential neighborhood about, you know, people getting tickets about parking on the swale. In the past week, we have received 3 tickets in 1 week for allegedly parking on the sidewalk on Prairie. We're not parking on the sidewalk. See ticket/image and image from today. Any insight what's going on? It's, and like the person isn't parking on the sidewalk and they're getting tickets for this, and this is a residential neighborhood, and and I'm like, all of a sudden I'm getting these complaints. So, you know, it's something we need to look into because people in residential neighborhoods want to be able to park, and maybe we could have people focus on FLC instead of, you know, people trying to park in front of their homes.
Right.
But just, you know, it's just getting all of a sudden a lot of complaints about this.
Well, we'll look into it. I apologize, I'm under the weather. We'll look into it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, guys, keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And is this item concluded, or do you want this to come back for future updates?
Maybe come back in a quarter.
Okay, so continue it to the,
Where we are and how things are going, if we need to tweak anything.
so we'll show this as by acclamation continued to the April 15th meeting. That would be
Excellent.
quarterly.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent, excellent. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 13.
Okay. Item number 13 is increased security requirements for nightclubs and other late-night drinking establishments.
All right, so this is an item that I place on the agenda, you know, to consider what increased security requirements we could have in place. You know, understanding that we've seen improvements in our city, and I think that that's the key thing. We're not facing some of the challenges that we had in the past, and we're not facing some of the challenges that we've seen in other areas. But Mr. Director or Mr. Attorney, if you could walk us through some of the proposals that we feel might be adequate to pursue at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I believe this memo was prepared by PD, but I'm happy to go through I think the 3 major options. I just don't want to speak for PD. Would you like me to go through them?
Sure, sure. Okay. And then I see Major Morgado is also approaching the podium, and then he can give us his recommendations as well.
Sure. So my reading of the committee's options are first to potentially expand the off-duty requirement. Currently, alcoholic beverage establishments that are on Ocean Drive between 5th and 15th Streets are required to provide at least one off-duty officer if they serve alcohol after midnight. It applies Saturdays and Sundays and on holiday weekends and city events. It also applies on Mondays. There is an exemption if 2 adjacent alcoholic beverage establishments share in securing an off-duty officer, and also if a bar is located entirely within a hotel and the hotel and bar are run by the same operator, or if the bar is located within a restaurant with a full kitchen and the restaurant closes by 2 in the morning. It is an affirmative defense to this violation if an operator is not able to secure an off-duty officer due to unavailability due to the unavailability to obtain an off-duty officer. The second option would be to expand the current notice requirement for promoted events. Our code requires certain alcoholic beverage establishments to provide the police department with 96 hours written notice prior to any promoted event if the establishment is licensed to serve liquor until 5 in the morning, if they're licensed as a dance hall, and if the total occ load is greater than 350 individuals. And the last recommendation that the police department identified is taking an approach similar to what the city of Orlando did for its downtown area, which would involve a rollback of alcohol hours of sale and creating a late night approval process where an establishment would be required to provide a number of security measures in order to obtain that approval.
Thank you, Nick. And so I'm just going to give my thoughts on this. You know, I think requiring more off duty will be an onerous on the establishments. I don't know if right now are we meeting the off duty demands of establishments, Chief?
No, sir, there's many off-duties that go unfilled, unfortunately.
And what can we do to address that? Because I think rather at this point, when it relates to that, rather than expanding the requirement on the businesses, what can we do to help meet the demand of the businesses for off-duty?
So what we've done in the past with certain businesses or certain establishments that neighbor each other is the establishments partner to hire one off-duty officer that covers both locations. That's an option that we've explored in the past. Potentially, we can look at trying to expand outside agency officers working and covering certain off-duties.
And how many agencies are allowed to do off-duty work in our city?
So any agency that's allowed to do off-duty work with us has already gone through the MOU process with
But how
us.
many are allowed to?
I honestly don't know the answer off the top of my head. I know it's probably 5 to 10 agencies is a safe number.
Okay. Okay, I like to,
And I can get that information for you.
yes, because it is germane to this item on how we could better improve on that. So given that right now we have requirements that we're not meeting, we've imposed a requirement, people are trying to meet the requirement, and we're not able to fill those demands. I don't want to touch that. What I do feel has been very successful, something I think Commissioner Samuelian initiated, which was a promoter ordinance, the registration.
Yes, he did.
And expanding that. Chief, can you guide us how that will benefit our public safety initiatives? Who right now is supposed to participate in this promoter ordinance, provide us with notification, and how expanding it would benefit our efforts?
So any establishment that's going to have alcohol sales till 5 a.m. that is going to have a promoted event has to notify us 96 hours before that event gets promoted. What has happened in certain situations is that they do not promote the event outside of that 96-hour window, so we're getting notified very short notice before. So are informing us that they just became aware of, or that it's not being promoted by the establishment, it's being promoted by an artist not affiliated with the establishment. So there are some issues with regard to that we need to fix potentially through a legislative process that we can discuss offline. But
this is the item to do that.
Yeah, well, why talk offline?
Yep, I mean, this is the item to do that.
So the issue that we've run into with certain establishments is that they look for loopholes in our current ordinance to not make that 96-hour notification. And we're getting notifications much closer to the actual date that the individuals are expected to perform. What that does for us is it hampers our ability to look into issues with that particular artist at other venues or issues that have occurred, potentially public safety issues, violence, and to ascertain if we need to ramp up our public safety presence in the area of one of those establishments. So there's been several incidents that have happened where we've gotten a late notification, but we've been able to mitigate.
What is the penalty for giving a late notification?
Well, what's happening is that the venue is not notifying us. The venue basically says, hey, we just became aware of this particular artist that's coming to visit us. And it's the artist that promotes it, not the venue. So the issue we have is we're unable to take action with regard to the venue because it's the venue saying, hey, we just became aware this artist is coming to visit us. It may not necessarily corroborate with a performance, it's an appearance. So there's certain aspects that the venues are able to not have to make that 96-hour notification, and we're becoming aware of it right before.
Commissioner Bond.
I want to let you guys know that I actually have an item coming to the commission on the 3rd that deals with trying to close these loopholes. And I think from somebody who's been in event marketing and event management, it is a very easy thing for the venue to say to the performer, we can't wait to have you here, but we're not going to promote it. It all has to be from you because we are not supposed to have you here, or we don't want to get involved with having to notify the police. So the fact that it's not the venue promoting it, or they didn't know, is a bunch of hooey in most cases. Look, it's possible that somebody's down here and they stop into a club and, get onto the stage. Sure, that happens. But the majority of this, when the performer is promoting, there's no way that.
I own property. If my tenant starts construction without pulling a permit, I get the violation. Or if someone shows up at my property and starts to do work without a permit, I get the violation.
Yeah, no, it's not acceptable.
Or if I'm a landlord and my tenant engages in short-term rental, I get the violation. Ultimately, the person that's responsible is the person who owns the property. If you own the property, if you own the nightclub, and whoever might be renting it, but I go in there and I slip and fall, the liability is on the owner. The buck stops with the owner. And, the owner can claim whatever they want. We need to fix this up. Commissioner Suarez and then Nick.
Nick, you mentioned three concerns that the police, not concerns, but possibilities. One of them was to, I think the last one, where we would shut down, we would make everyone 2 o'clock and then have an approval process till 5. Can we legally do that?
We can legally do it. It's one of the many options that the city commission has considered over the last couple of years to regulate alcohol hours of sale. We would be subject to challenge, as we are, whenever we roll back alcohol hours.
And this happened, I think you mentioned the city Orlando. This is what Orlando did?
Yes.
And were they challenged?
They were challenged on part of it, and I can find out what the outcome was of that. But they were challenged. Actually, they imposed, subsequent to that ordinance, they kept having issues. They imposed a curfew, I think of midnight, and they were challenged on that. But I can look into it and see if the original ordinance was challenged.
I'd like to explore that idea.
So let me just ask you this: don't we have an issue of vested rights in this city that perhaps Orlando might not have?
We do. I mean, many of the claims that we've seen
is based on
alcohol hours are based on operators who take the position that because of their land use board approvals or other city permits, that those vest them in certain alcohol hours of sale. And so that was the basis of the claim filed by the Clevelander in 2021, and it was the basis of a few other claims when the city has over the years tried to regulate alcohol hours of sale. The city, and the last one I think was the rollback for alcoholic beverage establishments south of 5th. The city prevailed against one of those claims. But whenever we roll back alcohol hours, we're going to be subject to challenge.
And I don't think it's I personally don't think it's where we're at right now, because I do see us making improvements. And I think, some of the legislation that we've passed, that you've sponsored, Commissioner Suarez, is helping us move the needle with that, especially by incentivizing supper clubs and upping the caliber of the establishments that are here. I think it's very difficult to get existing businesses and change the business models of some of these existing businesses, we've encountered significant challenges with that in the past. But I would love, Nick, for you to work on the promoter ordinance and get some of the recommendations of the police department and bring something back as it relates to that. Or if it overlaps with what Commissioner Bott is already working on, then, obviously we'll defer to Vice Mayor Bott. But there is a loophole. We need to close that loophole, because we don't create laws to be preempted by loopholes.
But, I think there's something, we talked about it yesterday at the strategy meeting. We've talked about it on the planning board together. We've talked about it a bunch of different times, and on a bunch of different contexts, that at the end of the day, it is, it's a privilege to do business here in Miami Beach.
Yeah.
And if you can't operate a business adhering to the rules of engagement that everybody else seems to be able to operate their businesses, then there's something wrong with your business model or your management team or whatever. There's something amiss. Like, Twist has been around for 30 some odd years. They are open till 5. They have all kinds of, people coming in and out at all hours of the day and night. And to the best, and correct me if I'm wrong, Assistant Chief, I don't think they're a problem actor in the city, nor do they have a history of being a problem actor. And I believe they're profitable, and they're certainly much beloved.
Yep.
Bob's Your Uncle is up in North Beach, and they're huge, and they're quiet, and they're open till 5, and nobody has an issue with them. So if you are a business that is conducting your business in such a manner that there is an ongoing issue with you, and look, everyone gets a mulligan, right? Shit happens, stuff happens, and I get that. But if you're consistently a location that there are calls for service or there's stuff happening that shouldn't be happening, people are getting hurt, then there's a problem. And if the business operator doesn't want to be responsible for that, and they fight every time they get called before whatever board is opining on that, then is there an opportunity for the property owner to be held accountable for the actions of their tenants, right? If your nightclub tenant has had 3 strikes, does that then roll over into something where the owner can be held responsible and they need to find a new tenant? Is that something that we could do?
Commissioner, Vice Chair, I think this ordinance could apply to both the event promoter, the operator, and the property owner. I mean, we can look at that, but I don't think there's any exclusion here. The other thing I would say is the 96-hour requirement applies unless the event or the performer is booked after, within the 96-hour window, in which case the establishment is required to immediately notify the police department. If we become aware that let's say a performer was booked before the 96 hours, was promoted online before the 96 hours, and they didn't provide the police department with 96 hours notice, that is a violation of the existing ordinance.
And what's the penalty?
It's the maximum civil fines that we can levy as a code enforcement matter. So I think it's $1,000 for a first violation, and it scales up.
Is there a limit to how many they can get before their business is on pause?
Yes. Yeah, it's scaled, and it's, is it 3?
3 and then 14 days.
Okay.
3 and what?
Three violations within 13 days subjects the establishment to a 14-day closure.
Yeah,
I think we should-
but 3 and 14 days?
No,
3
it's-
and
The third offense, you get 14-day shutdown.
14 days shutdown. In what period of time?
No period of time.
No period of time. Okay.
So what happens if you get 4? Like, at what point can we close the business for being a bad actor? I mean, it's 4 over 10 years, that's not a thing. But if it's 4 over the course of a year and a half, this is a pattern of behavior.
Right. If it's 4, the city can initiate proceedings to revoke the CU and the BTR, and to deem the establishment to be a habitual offender. Yeah.
But I don't understand. So, right now, people, the ordinance already applies even if you are within the 96-hour window.
Right.
And so I don't understand the concern of the chief.
So the issue for us is that what the promoters will do is they will notify us immediately when they become aware And that notification is coming 24 or 48 hours sometimes before they
I'm
have
sorry,
an
if
event.
they have not, okay, there's a reason why it's 96 hours. And I would imagine you need 96 hours because that is the time it takes you to do background research. And if,
Staff.
and if there's a concern, it gives you time to reach out to the event organizer, to the promoter, whoever it is, and say, listen, we have a concern, we feel we need this type of resource or that type of stuff. If they don't do that, I think we need to amend this to, you know, you're not allowed to open up if that person is there.
Or potentially, if they don't provide the 96-hour notice, they can't have the performer perform.
Yeah, I don't think you wait for the third time, because that, all you need is that first violation.
Right.
With something really bad for something to go really south. Just because they didn't notify. And so I, you know, that's where we really need to tighten things up. I think waiting for the third time, that they wait till the 96-hour window. No, like after the first time that you don't tell us within that 96-hour window, you know, no, you can't open up because you have not given the police sufficient time to do the appropriate vetting, Commissioner Suarez.
I think, you know, with spring break around the corner, you know, we should be moving this as fast as possible. I know Commissioner Bott is working on it, and I'm hopeful to get feedback on it. But, you know, March is right around the corner, and I'd like to see something very strong, where it's not just $1,000. You know, maybe during high-impact weekends or high-impact months, there is a zero tolerance policy.
We have something already where if during a high impact period, you violate some of our regulations, you are prohibited from getting a permit for a 13-month period. Nick, I don't know if you're the one that I worked on with that, or Mark, I don't know if you recall this. It was for doing business without it was for operating without a BTR. For operating without a BTR, if you were operating without a BTR during one of our high impact periods, then we were going to, we could suspend you for a 13-month period so that then you couldn't be operating during that same period next year, which addressed the issue of spring break. Someone, you know, operating during spring break, or let's say during Basel, you know, doing illegal stuff without a BTR, well, you wouldn't want that type of operator operating during spring break next year. So the 13-month covered it. Perhaps, you know, the same should apply for something like this. It should be a very strict penalty, Commissioner Suarez.
Yeah, thank you. Right on, and we have 2 meetings in February, and I hope by the second meeting in February, we can have a second reading where it would apply. I think we should have a very strong and strict standard for this type of event, because it really does take into account a lot of planning from police, and you know, a lot of these artists have a following, and some of them, you know, have like enemies where and the police need to know about that. And I think we should have a zero tolerance policy. I mean, I understand there's been legislation for BTR, but I'm looking more for if there's a violation, they have a BTR and they violated the notice rules, because it puts not only the residents at risk, but it puts the police at risk. And so we really should be echoing to the nightlife establishments that there's, at least during high impact periods, there's a zero tolerance policy. And I'm hoping that we can have that, Commissioner Bach can have that buttoned up by the second meeting of February.
Yeah, no, it's coming to the first meeting, and hopefully we'll get it right. The other thing that's tangentially related, but is
No pressure.
Yeah, sorry. Let me excuse myself, start working on it. The other thing that's tangentially related to it is the fact that we have nightclubs that have other types of violations beyond the 96-hour violation, where they are violating, they are not in compliance with our code, and they are dismissing it. Well, it's only it's only the tinting of the windows, it's only the queuing wasn't right, it's only this. But at the end of the day, those are laws on the books to protect our residents and protect our police officers and protect their patrons. And so this, this sort of dismissal of, oh, those are just inconsequential, or it was a one-off. Like as part of this whole conversation, I think we need to really talk about how those cavalier attitudes towards the laws that are on our books, when not just like, if we're not catching people violating those laws, but they are violating those laws and don't think they're important. I mean, like, the law is the law, and if you're not adhering to it, then the fourth time, the third time, the second time, you're done. So that's a little bit different from the 96 hour rule, but I think it fits into this overall topic.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say, we want to convey very strict enforcement, very strict penalties of this. I want to be very careful of any terminology that can be, misinterpreted, but I think it's, strict enforcement and strict penalties associated with this, because it really is a problem. And the only other thing I'll say is I'm glad you're bringing forward the issue of the promoters. Going back to 2 a.m., I would tell you, I might be wrong. I don't think 2 a.m. right now, has a shot at moving forward. And I would just say, in the past, we've considered like 30 different pieces of legislation. Nick, how many, or was it 29?
I think it was 30, yeah.
30 pieces of legislation. And the amount of staff time and legislative time spent debating it and debating it and debating it, and the amount of energy is sucked out of every single meeting. It just stalled progress on all the other things that have helped advance meaningful solutions and improvements. I don't want to say solutions because, shutting down a city is not a solution, but improvements in public safety, and many of which we've helped drive forward together. And so I just want to put that out there because I don't want us to get stuck in that logjam of discussion again. So with that, I think we can close this item, and I look forward to Commissioner Bott's item having to do with the promoters. Vice Mayor Botts.
Both of us.
Yes.
Both the commissioner and the vice mayor.
The commissioner and the vice mayor, exactly. All right.
Thank you.
Chief, thank you for being here. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 14.
Okay, item number 14 is discuss amending the land development regulations to provide for limited relief from setback requirements to permit the installation of packaged terminal air conditioning, commonly referred to as PTAC units, and mini split AC units.
All right, this is Commissioner Dominguez's item. Nick is the commissioner on Zoom to present on her item.
Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez.
Yeah.
No, she's not, Mr. Chair.
She's not. I'm familiar with this. This is to allow certain AC units for multifamily buildings within setbacks, which seems to be very, very good legislation, especially, helping with older residential buildings, and can help preserve those units and help those tenants out. So I think, I don't know, Mr. Director, if you want to present the item on the commissioner's behalf.
Sure, I can present it very briefly, Mr. Chair. The proposal here would amend section 7.5.3.2, which deals with allowable encroachments in required yards of multifamily districts. And the proposal would be to allow for an expansion of limited encroachments specific to package terminal air conditioning units, central air conditioning units, and mini split air conditioning units on existing buildings. It wouldn't be for new construction because new construction, from what we've seen, can easily accommodate that, but these would be for existing buildings which in the past have shown some difficulty with meeting setback requirements, particularly if they're converting from wall units. And so if there's consensus, the administration is recommending that this proposal be sent to the full commission for a referral to the planning board.
I support this item. I don't know if there's a motion to approve this item.
Yeah, I'll move it.
Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Suarez. Are there members of the public to speak on this item? Seeing none in person, none on Zoom, we can show this item passed by acclamation. Let's introduce item number 15.
Okay, item number 15 is discuss the business practices associated with accessing required parking spaces on private development and the underutilized parking provisions in the land development regulations of the city code.
So, I think we've all been receiving complaints ad nauseum about the business practices on private parking lots, and what can be done about these parking spaces. Just yesterday, I was seeing on social media, now that we've addressed the issue, the paid parking at the Chicken Kitchen and Smoothie King and Pinecrest Bakery on Alton Road, now it's the Whole Foods that people are having issues at. And so, I don't know what recommendations staff has. I know we've worked already on the signage, that there needs to be clear signage on private parking lots, and those lots that are licensed to operate as private parking lots. Have we engaged in any effort to do an operation to make sure that these private parking lots that are charging people for parking are actually licensed to do so and are meeting the requirements of our city code?
There's nothing in the LDRs that speaks to the operation of a private parking lot that is used for purposes of providing required parking. If an entity has a commercial parking lot that is not specific to required parking, then they do have certain operational
If I go
requirements.
to Whole Foods and I park at Whole Foods and I pay to park at Whole Foods to go, I don't know, somewhere else, not to go to Whole Foods, isn't that a commercial parking lot? Operating like a private parking lot?
The parking lot itself is considered required parking for Whole Foods. How they manage and operate that would be up to them. A surface parking lot that would be considered a commercial parking lot would be, for instance, the parking lot at the corner of Lenox and 17th Street, where you had a building torn down and then a surface parking lot was constructed. And that's used as commercial parking for whoever wants to come and pay for the parking there.
Commissioner Bott, Vice Mayor Bott.
Is there anything that we can do to regulate the fees that they charge? I got an email from a resident where he went into a particular parking lot specifically to use their charger. So it was fine with paying the fee for parking in order to be able to use the charger. The ticket didn't work or whatever. And instead of just like, here's a $20 maximum fee for, the day, he was charged $500, which seems egregious. Is there anything that we can do to limit how much people can charge for missed?
Unfortunately not. Parking is a lawful business activity, and under Florida law, we cannot impose price controls on any lawful business activity.
But one thing, and you just said it, parking is a lawful business activity. One thing is to have parking to meet the demands of your establishment, of your development. And if you want to charge, to go to your establishment, I guess that's your prerogative. And if your tenants complain, well, then you need to make a decision based on that. But a separate thing is when you're getting your parking, and now, you are charging people to park there so they can go to other places. And that to me is a very different type of business activity. Now you are operating a commercial parking lot, which from my understanding was its own category on our zoning code that has to abide with specific signage requirements and specific business practices. For example, our new sign requirement. And so the moment when you go from just providing parking to park there to go to your establishment, as opposed to providing parking to just, go, you're parking at Whole Foods, but to go to some other place 3 blocks away, that's a whole different type of operation. And you need to operate under a whole different segment of the code and get the right licenses, make sure you have the proper consumer protection signage in place, and a whole different set of business practices. Have we done a detail to enforce that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, well, I would like for us, if we can't regulate the pricing, and if we can't stop the practice, we need to make sure that the consumer is protected, that the consumers that we're going into it. And I would like for us to contemplate sending a motion back to the city commission, directing the administration to engage in an enforcement detail on this. I mean, for crying out loud, we are ticketing people for parking outside of their homes. And yet, people are getting away with giving people tickets in these private parking lots. I mean, it's just, to me, it's kind of like reverse.
Yep.
It's sick. It's so crazy to me. The commercial activity is not being penalized, and people are getting these crazy tickets by mail that end up going to some sort of collection agency someday. And that there's nothing, our hands are tied on that, yet someone parks on their swale and they're getting 3 tickets in 1 week, and this is outside of their homes. I mean, I don't get it. So let's have some compassion for our residents. Let's give our residents a little bit of a break, And by the same token, let's make sure that our residents, that they're protected from predatory charging at commercial parking lots. Let's protect our residents. And so I would like to, for us to contemplate that motion and pass it along to the city commission.
It's just so weird to me that the brick and mortar stores are bemoaning the lack of their business and bemoaning the fact that it's so much easier to order everything online and get it delivered. And yet when people do take the trouble to come to a store to get their products live and in the flesh, they have to pay for the service, for the privilege to go do their own shopping as opposed to getting it delivered. Something's wrong here. I get it that everyone's trying to make a buck, but, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So I would move that along.
Okay. All right. So understood. You got the motion? In
Yes.
order? Okay. So we can show that adopted by acclamation. All right. I'm going to defer number 16 to the next meeting. I would like us to reach number 17, and to do justice to item number 18, I'll defer it to the next meeting, because I know Commissioner Bodden needs to leave in a few minutes. So item number 17, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 17.
Okay, item number 17 is discuss the use of the middle turn lane as reversible lanes on 41st Street to improve traffic flow during peak traffic hours.
And I think anyone who has been on 41st Street during peak hours understand the capacity issue that we have on 41st Street, not just because of development in our city, but it's really the development in other cities and the traffic of the workforce trying to leave our city because of the affordability issue. And so we do have a capacity issue. We can't expand 41st Street, but what we do have is that center turning lane. And Jose, I think for years, you and I have been talking about that center turning lane and how can we better use that center turning lane during rush hour traffic to increase the capacity of individuals leaving the city. And so what is the feasibility of when everyone is heading west out of the city to be able to use that turning lane as an additional lane of straight traffic? Welcome, Jose.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, committee members. So absolutely, reversible lanes increase the capacity of a roadway. Typically, they're done during peak periods in the direction of the peak traffic to increase capacity along that direction. In this case, we're talking about 41st Street. So as we know, that is a state road under FDOT's jurisdiction. So we would need to follow a process that they have, which of course entails doing a long, arduous traffic analysis
When you say
to
long,
look
how
at-
long is a traffic analysis to consider
Well,
something like
the,
this?
it really depends on the nature of the project. In this case, 41st Street is not a very long street, you know? It goes from Alton to Collins. But the process is the same regardless. As part of the analysis, we look at things like distribution, split, traffic split, how much traffic is coming in the morning, in terms of percentage, volume versus in the afternoon. And there's gotta be a discernible split, something along the lines of 80-20, 70-30, where there's a significantly higher volume of traffic in one direction than in the other. However, in this case, this is a slightly different situation. What we're talking about here is converting a left turn lane into an additional lane. So it's not taking a lane away from one direction to give it to another. It's using the existing left turn lane as an additional lane and added capacity. So it's a little bit of a slight,
Maximizing our built infrastructure.
correct.
Because, I
correct.
mean, we have to remember that based on the FDOT 2022 level of service map, 41st Street and this corridor has been operating at a failing level of service based on the annual average daily trips. And so, you know, it is a capacity. And who is ultimately suffering are our residents and our workforce. And I'm so grateful. I know that the administration is exploring various strategies to manage the traffic volumes and increase the vehicular demand on 41st Street. Commissioner Suarez's 41st Street traffic recirculation pilot program, I think has improved conditions there. I mean, there is traffic. We can't make cars disappear, but to the extent that there is traffic, I think it's improved the situation there. I know we're looking at the creation of dedicated turn lanes on North-South Avenues. I know the administration is looking into that. Obviously, the GOB program. But as part of what we're looking at, you know, tell us what action you need from us so that we can, you know, study the feasibility of doing the reversible lane of 41st Street.
So in essence, a motion from this committee supporting a traffic analysis pursuant to FDOT's process to evaluate the feasibility of converting. In this case, it's, as we were mentioning, slightly different situation. It's converting a left turn lane into a through lane in the direction of peak traffic flow. So with that motion, and if it's approved by the city commission, we can proceed with the traffic analysis. We would get together with FDOT to define the methodology for this analysis, the scope of work, if you will, and we would need to identify funding for it.
What do we anticipate to be the cost of a study of this nature in ballpark?
I would say over 100,000, over 100,000.
And when, like, with the pilot program that we do, that we have the recirculation pilot program, did we have to do a traffic study with that?
So that was a pilot. We are doing we did a pre
So
study,
can
and
we do
we're
a
doing
pilot program
post-implementation.
on, can we do a pilot program on, given the need? I mean, people are stuck in traffic. Probably right now, they're probably watching us in traffic. If you're watching us in traffic, our hearts are with you, and we're trying to find solutions to alleviate the issue for you.
They should not be watching. They should be
Well, you should be listening. You should be listening. Can we do this via pilot program to see, like, is this worth even studying then as a permanent solution?
Mr. Tirwell, I would love to say yes. This is a bit more complex than the 41st Street pilot, because this is an entire corridor. It's 41st Street from Alton to Collins, and we're talking about, for example, there would need to be either an officer at every single intersection directing people on that lane as to where to go and where not to go, because signalization is a big component of these types of projects.
Okay, so we can work around that. We can't,
We're adding a lane,
we
so,
can't do the Commissioner Suarez approach of doing a pilot program.
no, this one is a bit more complex and.
Okay,
and-
well, you know, Commissioner Bond, you made a motion. I think certainly we want to move forward with this. So I would like to bring this back and maybe, rather than having to wait until the next budget process, if we could find a way, again, traffic is one of those things that people are, they need the solutions and they need the solution now. They don't need the solutions next fiscal year or 3 fiscal years down the road.
Plus, it's gonna take FDOT a year to get this study, so
Yeah.
the sooner the better.
Yeah, so Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jose, so do you think this would actually improve the situation during rush hour?
Well, it would add capacity, excuse me, it would certainly add capacity. So to that extent, I believe it could.
Because, I mean, I think the issue on 41st Street going west is really backups on 95 or 195. Would adding an extra lane help?
So
or-
if the causeway, it's a very good point, if the causeway is backed up, I-95 and the causeway is backed up.
Everything's gonna be backed up.
Everything is backed up. But there may be times where just having an additional lane, this conversion of the left turn lane may help get cars through. But there's a lot of details that need to be evaluated as part of this. At some point, there's a merge. There's right? Because there aren't 3 lanes that are, even if we put 3 lanes going westbound on 41st Street, there aren't 3 receiving lanes on the causeway itself. So there's already gonna be a pinch point there. And all these are elements of the traffic study that will be looked at to determine if it makes sense or not.
And
So-
isn't there going to be a change on 195 coming to the beach? I think it was at this committee where they explained the changes that are.
There is a future project, but it's way out there. They're still in the preliminary engineering phase, and it's still many years from construction, and it's not fully
Yeah,
funded.
we can't wait that long.
But, correct. But what this, at least this feasibility analysis will do is it will look at whether this, makes sense to do and what it would cost, because there are signalization implications.
I think, Mr. Chair and colleagues, I think the number one issue, definitely on the top 3 issues that our residents always tell us about is traffic. And I think it's money well spent to explore every opportunity where we have severe pain points.
In absence of building a bridge from Collins Avenue to the Tuttle, we can at least try to maximize our existing roadways to add capacity.
Yeah,
All right,
So I'll move the item.
all right. And
second.
all right, awesome. So by acclamation, we can show this adopted. And let's try to bring this, please, to the February Commission meeting.
So this is concluded at land use, and a recommendation on the traffic study will be brought to the commission.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please. With that, any other items to be discussed here today?
Do you think on the last item, there should be, as part of the recommendation of the commission, a referral to FERC, since it involves a potential budget amendment?
I think there's, Mr. Attorney, I want to be respectful of my colleague, Commissioner Magazine. I would like to see if we can get this passed at finance, and the commission, with the 5/7 waiver. Is there a 5/7 waiver for an item, Mr. Attorney?
Give me 1 second, let me just make sure.
So let's see if I really like to be respectful of my colleague. If my colleague wants it to go to FERC, I'll send it to FERC. You're the vice chair of FERC. What is your feeling, Mr. Vice Chair?
I'm okay with sending it to commission and seeing if we have a 5/7 vote to approve it there.
So with the guidance of the vice chair of FERC's input, we will send it to the city commission.
There is the option of a waiver on a 5/7, yeah.
Okay, and if Commissioner Magazine really wants this to be considered a FERC, I'll respect that if he wants to pull the item. Colleagues, thank you for your time. Commissioner Bott, I promised you 5:30, and 5:30 we're concluding the meeting. And to the 50 officers heading to the presidential inauguration, representing our city and representing us at a historic moment, thank you for representing the city of Miami Beach along with the other police departments in our country. Thank you so much. Have a good night.